You know, a lot have tried, but few have succeeded making the jump from Common Council, especially Common Council President, to the mayor's office. How do you think that you did it? Do you think it was just kind of right place at the right time?
You know, as I was doing these cards this morning, I was multitasking and doing some calls to supporters as well. And one of the supporters that I reached out to brought up that very same point, but pointed out our electoral victory on the primary and what we hope to be a strong electoral victory on April 5th as well. And really, it boiled down to the work. He said, "You know, Cavalier, you are working." He said, "Chevy, you're working really, really hard, and it shows." And so that's what I think will be the defining or separating moment here with our election, is that we're working hard, and we'll continue to do that, again, until the very last minute of the very last day.
Incumbents statistically win elections. I mean, that's just proven across the board. With the case with Marvin Pratt, that wasn't the case, as we know. How are you feeling going into April? I know that, you know, you kind of ran away with the primary. I'll just put it like that. But there's still 35% of the vote that the other candidates got, not including Bob Donovan, that you're still, I'm assuming, vying for. So how are you going after that? Are you feeling confident that you're going to come out the winner on April 5th?
Yeah, well, I think the primary election just showed exactly what our strategy is, and that's to, again, fight for every single vote in every single neighborhood. Look, when you look at the data broken down from the primary election, we won every single African-American ward in the city of Milwaukee. We won the one Asian majority ward in the city of Milwaukee. We won the most majority white wards of any other candidate in the city. We had a broad coalition that stretched from the far northwest side all the way to Bayview and the east side. So we are fighting for every single vote in every single neighborhood. In fact, in the 3 aldermanic districts that I did not win, we still performed exceedingly well. I think in the aldermanic district where my opponent did his best, we still scored 30% of the vote. And so I'm going to fight for every single vote in every single neighborhood, campaigning on issues that people all across the city of Milwaukee care about.
What do you think they care about?
I think they care about public safety, first and foremost. We've got an unfortunate rash of reckless driving activity that's been happening in the city. They want somebody who's going to take some action on that. They're concerned about the shootings that we have in Milwaukee, whether it's non-fatal shootings or homicides. Those are things that folks really care about. They want to see a new way forward. They want to see us develop new relationships with Madison. They know that what's happened in the course of the past decade plus just hasn't worked. And because it hasn't worked, that means we haven't been able to deliver for Milwaukee. And so they want a leader in the mayor's office who's going to be able to mend those fences. And then lastly, you know, certainly not lastly, but I think, you know, one of the chief things they want are opportunities, right? It's poverty that begets violence. And so we need a leader who understands the connection between the two and will work hard every single day to bring family supporting job opportunities to the people of this city.
What made the difference in your life to want to pursue something as lofty as, you know, the mayoral office?
What helped me to get on this path, considering where and how I grew up with the challenges that I did. I mean, the challenges that continue to face a number of kids in those same neighborhoods today are chances, are opportunities, was grace from folks. Like, I keep telling folks there's nothing special about me. Like, there's absolutely nothing special about me. I grew up facing the same sort of challenges that so many kids in Milwaukee face even today. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, when I was growing up, I made mistakes. When I take drives throughout the city, I see not only neighborhoods that I lived in, but I see places where I made errors in my own life. I see, you know, corner stores that when I was a kid hanging out with the wrong crowd, I stole from. And instead of calling the police on me, the store clerk sat me down and said, I was taking gummy worms. It wasn't like I was, like, you know, robbing the cash register or anything like that. But the store clerk sat me down and said, "Hey, you know, I could call the police on you. You can get in trouble for this, right? Like, this could change your whole life." I think I was like 8 years old at the time, hanging out with the wrong crowd. And it was that sort of grace and providing a second chance that helped me. Later on in life, I had the opportunity to get involved in a pre-college program for low-income kids in Milwaukee Public Schools that wanted to do better with their life, called Sponsor a Scholar, that was run by the YMCA at the time. And that program really connected me with folks and set me out on the path that I'm on now. Because not only was it to get kids to go to college, and I did. I went to UW-Madison and became the first person in my family to graduate college. the program also worked to connect those same young people with service opportunities and giving back. And I fell in love with service. I fell in love with waking up every day, or at least on the weekends at that time as a kid, doing service projects, feeding the hungry, going to Easter seals, all of that. And it really set me on this trajectory for service in my life. Also had the opportunity to have mentors that intervened in my life that taught me life lessons that I live by today. Such as, if you do good things, then good things will come to you. Things like, you don't chase dollars or money, you chase purpose, and to never give up. If there's something that you are passionate about, something that you really want to work for, like somebody's going to do the job. And if you're willing to do the work, then why shouldn't it be you? So those things, the cumulative of those things is how I got to be in the seat that I'm in right now.
Well, I mean, your passion is evident. I mean, that's just evident. I think, your path to getting here, how you kind of got into that community service and giving back. And I mean, you can just feel it. It just like radiates from you. But you said two things that really struck a chord with me. I'm not special. And I think that that's key, because I think that a lot of, I'm speaking even my own children, that, well, I'm not like so-and-so. Like, you don't have to be like that person. You just need to be you and, continue to build on that. So I think that's huge, saying that you're not special. You just continue making right decisions, hopefully. But also the fact that others gave you, like the store clerk, he gave you a bit of grace. He gave you that second chance, which is so huge. And so many of us have gotten second chances in life. Do you think people, especially business owners who have had things stolen from them, have had their gas stations lit on fire, whatever it might be, do you think they're sick of that? Do you think that they're past the second chance point, the grace period, in a lot of ways?
I would imagine that when I got a second chance, that that probably wasn't the first second chance that the store clerk gave to a young African American boy who had some of the same experiences growing up in this city that I did. I don't know if folks are past it. I know that folks, certainly are tried by, the situations that we face in the city. And quite frankly, again, the poverty that we see, which then leads to those sort of activities, with criminal activity, things that ultimately end up hurting our society. I think that they get that. I think that they understand that. I think they really want to help.
How do we fix the poverty aspect of it, though? Because you're right, I think so much does go back to that. That's where, if you're looking down at the root cause of all of this sort of stuff, so much of it stems from there. And so many programs and so much money and so much funding has been poured into different community groups and initiatives and whatnot to try to address that problem. Do you think that things have been done over the past 10 years? Just say, like in your political tenure, that things have been done to try to get at that poverty? And why do you think that they haven't worked? And what would you do different?
I think that when you look back at Milwaukee's history, right, decades ago, we used to have the highest quality of life for African Americans in the United States. You fast forward 4 decades or so to where we are now, and African Americans are at the top of the worst list in Milwaukee across the country. That's exactly the point, is that what changed is that those communities don't have access to family supporting work. Just think about it.
Did they 40 years ago, though?
Yeah, they did. They did. Like, when there were plentiful heavy manufacturing jobs that were available in Milwaukee, that's when we were in a position where African Americans had the highest quality of life in the country. That's where we're in a position where some of the neighborhoods where, unfortunately, there are news reports at 10 o'clock at night, those neighborhoods were stable. They had homeowners there, right? And so that's what we need to be trying to get back to, understanding full well that it's not going to be one large manufacturer that brings in 20,000 family supporting jobs and then that's it. Right, so we have to find new ways in order to get people back to family supporting work. And my idea, my thought is this, and I see it in my own life. I was just talking about this actually 2 nights ago with my wife. When I look at my own experience growing up in this city, and then I look at my children, my 3 kids, their experience is totally different. And the reason for that is because they have stability in their life. And the reason that they have that stability is because both of their parents have family supporting work. So we bring the stability into the home, the kids' reaction on the street, as well as in school is different because they have that stability. We're homeowners ourselves. When you get a critical mass of that and folks are buying homes in their neighborhoods, it's no longer that you're looking across the street to your neighbor and you don't say hi to them, you don't have any relationship with them. Those relationships, they become important, neighborhoods become cohesive, and when neighborhoods become cohesive and they start to gel, the people that live there are not transient and the neighborhoods aren't porous, that's how you get to true public safety.
What are you going to be able to do as mayor that you couldn't do on the Common Council for the years that you were on there?
Yeah, I think as mayor, you certainly have a bully pulpit. You have a larger microphone. It's probably easier to get in with some of the powers that be, especially in the legislature, in order to bring up the issues that are important to the city. And I certainly will be doing that. I have already started doing that. I've had a meeting already with Speaker Voss within the past couple of weeks. I'll continue to do that outreach with him and other members of the legislature, especially on the Republican side. We just had legislators in Milwaukee just yesterday at the courthouse at gun court, trying to impress upon them the importance of making sure we tackle this issue of gun violence and the state's role in that case, and hopefully bringing down some additional resources to help us at the local level to address it too. So this is something, again, that's top of mind for me and something I'll be working in my entire time as mayor to address.
Are you looking to bolster the police department at this point?
In the police department, we've got problems with attrition. We have for a number of years here. We tried for years not to make cuts to the police department, but unfortunately, because again, the state shared revenue, going back to the relationship with the state, it just hasn't been what it ought to be. And so we no longer at a position where we can sacrifice or not, or not touch the police department. And so I would want to maintain the number of police that we have here. We also have a matrix study that was voted on by the Common Council and is in the process of being worked on right now. That'll tell us what the appropriate number of police are for the city the size of Milwaukee. That report comes back and it says that we should have additional police officers. I'm happy to add those police officers. However, and this is key though, I understand that in order to do that, I'm going to need resources in order to make that happen. And that's where I think having the relationship with Madison is going to be critical, is going to be key. And that's why I'm working, I've already been working and I'm going to continue to work to develop those relationships so that whether it's public safety or any other thing, that we are in a best position to make those investments. Do
you think that public safety and crime go hand in hand with the number of police that are on the streets? Do you think that there's a direct correlation there between the two?
There's there may be a correlation, but I don't think it's necessarily that. I think we should be wise enough to understand, and the police will tell you this themselves, that they alone can't solve all the public safety issues that we have. They certainly play a deterring force when they're out there in a show of force, and I get that, I appreciate it, and I understand it. But they'll be the first ones to tell you that they can't do it alone. And that's why it's important to have a holistic view of public safety. It's 2022 now, right? It's not 1932. And so we know that there are other things that are out there, other avenues that we can use in order to address the issue of public safety. We just talked about it a little earlier about the root cause, and that's working on the issue of poverty. That is ultimately how you reduce crime. But in the immediate term, right, there's policing, but there's also those other interventions that we talked about. Violence prevention, stopping retaliatory violence before it starts.
How do you do that though?
Well, I mean, you work with groups like the Office of Violence Prevention. You work with some of the programs that I mentioned that were effective for me growing up, making sure that kids, particularly young people in our community, have outlets so that they don't get involved with the wrong crowd and don't end up in a position where they're committing some sort of criminal act. Where's
the money? Because I know a lot of money is being poured into the Office of Violence Prevention. Where are those dollars actually going? Like day in and day out, not big picture, but day in and day out, where are those dollars going?
Yeah, so the Office of Violence Prevention will work with a number of the community-based organizations here, reaching out to young people and other folks who may be susceptible to committing acts of violence in our community. So it's working directly with organizations like Running Rebels, for instance, to make sure that they have the infrastructure and the programming in place to engage these young people so that acts of violence don't occur. And I will say this too, because I know that there are some critics of violence prevention and those efforts out there. When COVID hit, nationally, and especially in large cities, you saw this spike of gun violence, a spike of those sort of activities. It certainly has hit Milwaukee, but it's hit a number of large cities across the country. But you look at the 4 years prior, when the Office of Violence Prevention got its revamp and we're actually out there hitting the streets, we were actually seeing a reduction year over year in the number of people who were killed by firearms in Milwaukee. That's the vast majority of people who are killed. So it is effective. Obviously, we've had a nationwide issue with gun violence, and that's something that we ought to address. And I think that the Office of Violence Prevention should be our partner, along with police and other avenues, in order to address the issue.
Well, 2 years ago when COVID hit, like in 2020, I know that you guys were going through the budget at that point. You were the Common Council president, and at that point you had co-sponsored a bill that was looking to cut like $30 million from the police department. Now, I know the police department is a huge chunk of the budget. It's like 47% of the budget, not a drop in the bucket. But MPD said that would equate to 375 officer positions. So in a time when crime was skyrocketing in our city, you were looking to try to slash funding from the police department. Can you just explain that a little bit? And had your thought changed at all in the last 2 years?
Yeah, and I would encourage folks to go and look at that legislation. It was actually a study to see what that might look like, so that we can use some of those dollars to invest it in alternatives to policing. Because as I said, as I've worked with police over the years, they will tell me, and they'll tell anybody, that they can't do it alone. So it was a model to see what that might look like, so we can help support police from outside of the department. But you're right. I mean, we don't have a lot. We don't have money floating around out here. That goes back to the relationship with the state again. And so that's what that was about. And that's where out of that conversation we had the matrix study that I mentioned, so that we can have a proper determination of the number of police officers, sworn police officers and otherwise, that we ought to have in our department.
And that's coming out when? When's that study?
I believe later this year.
Okay.
I want to say is
It'll be interesting
when
to
that's
see what
coming
that
out.
says.
So that came out of that process.
Yeah.